Call the Winchendon Planning Board regular meeting of June 21st to order at 7:04. Okay, the first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Just want to announce that you're more than welcome to record the meeting, to film it, however you want to do it. You just have to let us know that you're doing it. Third item is announcements. Do any of the board members have any announcements they would like to say? Okay, moving on. It is 7:05 is public hearings, formal site plan review, special permit application for Cumberland Farms project, Central and Front Street. I call the hearing to order at 7:05. Don't need that. First item is I read the public hearing notice. Notice is hereby given that the Winchendon Planning Board will hold concurrent public hearings on Tuesday, June 21st, 2016 at 7:05 p.m. in the Town Hall Auditorium, second floor, 109 Front Street, Winchendon, Mass. 01475 on the special permit and site plan approval applications of Cumberland Farms, Inc. of 100 Crossings Boulevard, Framingham, Mass. 01720 for properties located at 95 Front Street, owned by Cumberland Farms, Inc. of 100 Crossings Boulevard, Framingham, Mass. 01720, identified as Assessor's Map 5B2, Lot 309, 109 Front Street. Garage owned by the Town of Winchendon, identified as portion of map 5B2, lot 295, 32 Central Street, owned by Catherine Drudy, identified as Assessor's Map 5B2, lot 307 and 22 Central Street, owned by Catherine Drudy, identified as Assessor's Map 5B2, lot 308. Special permit sought as afforded under Article 4, Section 7.2J to allow for the construction of conventional drainage structures. Said properties are located in the PD Planned Development District. A copy of the application is available to the Department of P&D, Winchendon Town Hall. All interested persons should plan to attend. So that is the notice. I just need to note the order that we will be following tonight is the applicant will give their presentation, we will hear from staff, and then the public will be given an opportunity to speak to any issues they want. The only thing that I have to say in regards to that is if you want to speak to an issue, you have to come up and speak at the microphone. Second item is that I need to swear in anybody that's going to give testimony tonight. Will each of you who are expected to testify today please raise your right hand? Do each of you swear and affirm to tell the truth in the testimony that you are to give?
I do.
Okay, great. So as I said, the applicant, Cumberland Farms, if you would introduce yourself and give us your presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I can't tell if this is on. It does sound like it is. My name is Phil Lombardo, and I'm the attorney for the project. And with me, to my right, is Luke DiStefano, the project engineer. Sitting behind me are Dawn Johnson from Cumberland Farms and Phil Viveros, our traffic engineer from McMahon Associates. What I thought we might do is just give a very brief overview of the history of the permitting process so far, and then have Mr. DiStefano take you through the existing conditions of the current Cumberland Farms site and the sites being acquired to do the project. For about 2 to 3 years now, we've been meeting informally with staff members and informally and formally with the Historic Commission and formally with the Zoning Board of Appeals in order to arrive at a plan that we are hopeful that this board will find more than adequate with respect to this cornerstone property in Winchendon. As you all know, currently Cumberland Farms operates a convenience store gas station on the corner, and Cumberland Farms will be seeking to acquire the town garage and 2 parcels next door in order to put a new store on site with brand new pumps and fuel tanks, and effectively create an entire new project. With your package, and we'll show you this evening, are building elevations, which will show the look of the building, and we should be able to give you a pretty good look this evening as to how the project will look. We have received various comments from staff and also from the peer review party reviewing these plans on the town's behalf. And we're prepared to address those in whatever order you wish, but I'm thinking with your permission, Mr. Chairman, we'll have Mr. DeStefano introduce the project.
Good evening. My name is Luke DeStefano with Bowler Engineering, Southborough, Mass. As Phil indicated, this is a proposed raise and rebuild of a series of property located in the northeast corner of the intersection of Front Street and Central Streets here in the town of Winchendon. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the location, as you can see it if you look out the window, but it is basically a culmination or a combination of 5 structures right now. You have the Cumberland Farms, you have the existing retail building adjacent to it, you have the town garage, you have a single-family residence with a detached garage, and in total on site right now you have about 10,000 square feet of structures if you add everything up. The site in and of itself is just over 34,000 square feet, so it's a relatively small lot, and that's inclusive of the various properties that will be combined to form what we hope to be the final Cumberland Farms piece if we're lucky enough to get the approvals. But as mentioned, it is a complete raise and rebuilding of basically all 5 structures and everything that goes along with it. So underground utilities, miscellaneous fuel dispensing equipment, the underground storage tanks, product piping, etc., will all be demolished and removed so that the existing condition, which you see on the rendering to my far right, will ultimately cease to exist with the exception of one large tree located in the northern corner of the property. Under the proposed condition, Cumberland Farms is proposing to construct just shy of a 5,000 square foot convenience store. 4,950 some odd square feet will be the size of the new building. They're also looking to construct 3 multi-product fueling dispensers, which, because you can fuel on either side, would allow for 6 vehicles to fuel at any one given time. Those dispensers would be situated beneath an overhead canopy, very similar to what you see at pretty much every other gasoline facility here in New England nowadays. The dispensers would be serviced by 2 20,000-gallon state-of-the-art double-wall fiberglass underground storage tanks, double-wall product piping. Basically, all of the fuel dispensing systems to be installed will meet or exceed every federal, state, and local regulation as it relates to that type of equipment. We're proposing improvements to landscaping. Under the existing condition, we have, as you can see, a majority of the landscaping located on the northern end of the property. Some of that landscaping is in rough shape, some of it is fairly viable. Under the proposed condition, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to add landscaping around the perimeter. I'm sure you're, again, familiar with the property, so you know we're limited in some regards given the very narrow room we have to work in, but as you can see, we're trying to grab landscaping wherever we can, and although The proposed condition results in about 3,000 square feet of additional impervious surface. We feel that the type of landscaping and the plantings that we will be constructing or installing will result in not only an enhancement in how it operates in terms of stormwater management, but also aesthetically, by adding some plantings along Central Street and a small landscape buffer, enhancing the intersection, I think is a big improvement as well. Another improvement to the property will be a combination of curb cuts. Under the existing condition, the site is accessed by 3 full movement curb cuts. There's a single full movement curb cut on Front Street, and then 2 additional full movement curb cuts on Central Street. The plan, as you can see before you, results in a combination of the 2 curb cuts along Central Street, so we're effectively reducing the number of access points onto Central Street by 50% and the total number of access points into the property by 1/3. Phil with McMahon can speak in more detail to traffic, but we feel that's another improvement to the property. Lastly, I think it's important to mention the stormwater management on site right now versus what will be there post-construction. Under the existing condition, you basically have a fairly steep slope from west to east, or from the back left corner of the property to the front right. There's about when you get right down to it, about a 15-foot elevation change from the Front Street curb cut immediately adjacent to Town Hall to this corner of the property here. There's about a 10-foot change from here to the curb cut. So under existing conditions, basically what you have is all of the stormwater generated on the property sheet flowing untreated and unabated into the Central Street drainage system. Under the proposed condition, what we're looking to do is collect and pre-treat any stormwater that's generated on the asphalt portion of the property. We are also proposing to collect and infiltrate the runoff from the Cumberland Farms convenience store roof. There are some issues with soil conditions which make it impractical for us to infiltrate the runoff from the paved area. So as mentioned, that runoff is going to be collected through a series of deep sump hoods with oil water, or deep sump catch basins with oil water hoods. All of that runoff will then be conveyed into a storm scepter stormwater quality unit before being discharged back into the Central Street drainage system. Now, if you've had an opportunity to review the drainage report that was provided, you'll see that under the proposed condition, we have some significant reductions in runoff rates to that drainage system. So at the end of the day, we feel that what you'll have under the proposed condition will be not only an improvement to the amount of stormwater exiting the property, but the quality of the stormwater exiting the property will be enhanced as well. With that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions relating to the site, or we can turn it over to Phil with McMahon to touch on traffic.
Do you have the elevations mounted? Elevations mounted?
Just as far as the stormwater, as I understand that you will be doing a lot more drainage than just in front of your property, could you touch on what you'll be doing on Central Street?
Sure. There is right now, there's a catch basin existing in Central Street right here. And originally we had looked at tying into that, but there's no outlet to that basin. So what we have to do is we have to extend the proposed drain line down Central Street to another location. I forget the exact distance. It's a couple 100 feet or so. So it won't be a lot of work, but there'll be some trenching and some drainage pipe proposed within Central Street to accommodate the runoff. And what's important to note as well is that there's an existing catch basin located on Town Hall property that discharges to that same location. We're going to continue to maintain that. That's one of the things we're working through with town staff, but that had come up during early research on the property. We're going to continue to maintain that drainage system from the Town Hall property, but as mentioned, we'll now have a direct connection to an outlet within the system further down Central Street.
I apologize if I missed it, but is there a reduction in the grade itself coming across the parking lot? I mean, 15 feet is 15 feet, but in terms of the grade itself, what, are you changing the percentage?
Well, no, basically, we're limited by what we have for curb cuts. There's an existing curb cut basically in this area now, and another one up along Front Street, pretty much in the same place where we're proposing the new one. So we really have to match those grades pretty close, because those are points that we can't change. So it's gonna change a little bit. We wanna try and make the island mat, where we have the fuel dispensing equipment, we generally try and make that as flat as possible, but for the most part, grading will be pretty close to what's out there.
And will that, without a change, what's it going to look like with traffic going in and out of the Central Street curb cut compared to what's there now? I mean, you still have cars bottoming out?
No, and when we design this, we have to take, obviously, that into account. Right now, under the proposed condition, I think our driveway is about 5% coming into the site off of Central Street. 5% is no more than what you would see on a typical handicap ramp, so it's not a steep slope by any means, nothing that's gonna cause the back end of cars to drag along Central as they drive into the site. You're welcome.
Any other questions from any of the board members?
Yes, if I could. I have a quick question about the landscaping on that, on the corner of Front and Central. In terms of elevation, because the site is significantly higher on one end of that landscaping, at the bottom, is the idea to have that landscaping contour to that surface? Is it gonna be raised and have a retaining wall on one side or the other? I was just wondering if you could give me a little bit more detail on what that corner around that sidewalk would look like.
Yeah, we're gonna keep it low. Obviously, we need to maintain visibility, so the landscaping is basically gonna follow the contour of the land. We're not gonna have retaining walls in that section. There is a large retaining wall proposed along the western edge separating the Cumberland Farms property from the Town Hall property, but effectively, that area of the site, we're gonna have a pylon sign and the landscaping around it, but it'll all be low-growing landscaping, so nothing that's gonna cause a visibility issue as you come around. The other thing to take into account is the fact that there's about another 8 to 10 feet of sidewalk between where the plantings will be and where the actual travel way of the road is. So as you come around Central onto Front, you're gonna have plenty of visibility along Front, and obviously plenty of visibility as you look south opposite of Front.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If I could take a detour to the actual site design features, we're very proud of the design that we've presented to you, which is the result of literally years of discussions with staff and the Historic Commission. And I know, I see here that you have some, photometric renderings of what the site would look like when it's built. And we have stressed to the Historic Commission that we would submit the plan that they have reviewed and indicated their assent to, but we've stressed that the ultimate arbiter of the design is in this board, but we would like to advocate for the design that we've submitted and that you're looking at. And I can just give you a couple of features of that, which is around the perimeter of the site. To answer your question, sir, you can see where the plantings are, and they're specifically designed so as not to impede traffic visibility. We're happy to have further discussions about landscaping with this board. You'll see that the sign that we're proposing is one that we received by variance from the zoning board. Effectively, it's an alteration of what is out there now. It's a non-conforming sign. So we received permission to effectively lower the sign and in our opinion, make it look better. And then in the background, you'll see the canopy over the pumps, which has a hip roof feature to it. And then, of course, in the deep background is the prize jewel of the store itself, which we've designed to try to replicate a market store look as best as possible, using the brick and the various colors that you see. We also are proposing some fencing around the site that we're happy to get in discussions with. We did indicate we'd be willing to put in, certain kinds of, wrought iron fencing, but recognize the fact that this can only happen through discussion with this board. So we welcome those discussions as we move forward. And if you have any questions about the design, we can answer that as well before we get into traffic.
I just wanted to ask Tracy, not being a hydrologist, I'm not always quite sure how all of these things work, but I know that in the past, parts of Central Street, generally, frankly, down closer toward the post office and the Y, in a good, heavy, steady rain has in the past been prone to street flooding. And I just wonder if what they're proposing has any effect either way, either positively or negatively, in terms of what the likelihood of that occurring would be.
That's actually a question that I asked the Public Works Director, and in his opinion, and there's also a letter in your packets, that he sees it as a considerable improvement. He's pleased that they're going to put it in. It actually will extend all the way to the police station, and I don't have the exact how many feet that is, but that's where that will go. And he was pleased that they were going to do that.
Thank you.
I just want to stress that Luke points out that right now you have an outlet that does an outlet, so you have water going into it. Obviously, it fills up and then goes where it's going to go. We find, this is not being the first rodeo, we find that when we improve a site, other sites tend to want to be improved around, and this board gets a chance to talk about drainage with anybody who wants to come forward. And it takes time, but ultimately, a bad situation improves greatly through a series of projects, that come before you.
Just a quick question. On the sign you depict there, is that the sign that you're planning to put?
Yes,
or-
sir. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so at that height?
Yes.
And you don't feel it will obstruct traffic or
No, it's
obstruct the view?
correct, sir. It's designed so that it's tall enough. The undercarriage of it is tall enough to allow visibility. And we've toyed with various types of signs. Some towns want a straightforward monument sign, which become traffic issues. This is a pretty tasteful sign. It's got enough height to it, if you will, to allow for clearance, but it's not anywhere near as high as the one that we have now. So it's a pretty nice compromise.
Is this the, I got a ton of questions, but I would like to have them go through their
Okay, very
presentation
good.
first.
Well, without any further ado, we'll have Phil come up and discuss traffic and maybe take Luke's place, and I'll sit here for no particular reason.
Good evening again. My name is Phil Viveros, professional traffic engineer licensed in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I work with McMahon Associates with offices in Massachusetts and downtown Boston and in Taunton, Mass. We performed a traffic study for this site based on looking at the existing conditions of the site and comparing it to the proposed conditions. As Luke mentioned, the building size is approximately 4,900 square feet with 6 fueling positions. We did a traffic count for this intersection, the front and central intersection, along with the existing site driveways. That was done in June of 2015, which is an above average traffic month based on the most recent available Mass DOT data. So the counts weren't adjusted for any seasonal factors to be conservative. We looked at crashes at the study area intersections. As you might expect, the major intersection has the most crashes. In the 3-year period we looked at, there were a total of 24 crashes of various types, some angles, some rear end, largely attributable to the geometry of the intersection. All the crashes that we looked at in the study area, however, were property damage only, so there were no personal injury crashes and no fatalities, fortunately, in the crashes that we reviewed. In the future condition, we looked at traffic growth, looking at a 7-year forecast, which complies with current Mass DOT guidelines for traffic studies. In speaking with the town planner and the regional planning agency, we used a 1.5% growth rate for background traffic growth. That's a compounded rate on an annual basis, and determined that there were no other site-specific improvements adjacent to the site that would contribute further traffic. So the background growth is what we use to look at the future no-build condition projected growth. To look at trip generation of the site, we use the ITE trip generation data, which is a standard engineering practice. It's a national database of data that's used to project vehicular trip generation for a variety of different land uses. The land use that we looked at is a convenience market with gas pumps, which is similar in nature to the proposed use. In looking at the projected numbers based on the size of the site, we also accounted for the existing trip generation of the site to credit for that, since it's an expansion of the current use. And then also applied what's called a pass-by factor, which accounts for the fact that this type of a site is typically not a destination for folks. It's generally a convenience for, if you're going somewhere else and on the way you want to stop and get gas or stop and get milk, eggs, whatever, accounting for the fact that many of the trips generated by a site of this type already exist on the roadways and are just, again, passing through to another destination. So with that in mind, we determined that there would be approximately 16 new vehicles generated by the site in the morning peak hour and 29 new vehicles generated by the site in the afternoon peak hour, with all those credits applied. So those would be new trips or new vehicles coming to the study area based on the proposed project. In terms of generating a trip distribution pattern, where they're coming from, we essentially looked at the existing patterns of the front Central Street intersection and used those existing trip patterns to distribute new trips to the site. And we did a level of service analysis to look at traffic operations for the front Central intersection as well as the site driveways. Using national standards, the Highway Capacity Manual, it's a graded scale from A to F. Just like in school, A is the best conditions, F is the worst operating conditions. In that sense, the stop-controlled approach at Central Street currently operates at a level of service F. It continues to with the existing no build and build conditions. So that's independent of additional trips to the site. The roadways in front of the driveways operate well, and in terms of the driveways themselves, they operate at either level of service B or C, depending on the scenario that we looked at. It's a C in the build condition for both driveways with the improvements in place, with queuing at approximately 1 car at each of the driveways. So in terms of internal circulation, we feel that there would be adequate room for cars to maneuver around the site. As Luke mentioned, there are 2 full-access driveways that are proposed. The Central Street driveway, because of the additional parcels that are being proposed to be acquired as part of the redevelopment, allows us to move that Central Street driveway further north, further away from the intersection, and in doing so, with the improvements, provides adequate distance away from Front Street, as well as providing adequate site distance. And we believe that from our study that there would be no major degradation of operations as a result of this site. I do want to acknowledge that there were comments that were received to us. In particular, for traffic purposes, we received a comment letter from Mass DOT's District 2 office in Northampton from their traffic engineer. And there were 3 comments in there I just want to acknowledge to the board. The first comment was regarding queuing along Central Street. In other words, backups and congestion and concerns about whether those backups would impact the Central Street driveway in terms of blocking the access. Cumberland Farms, in speaking with them, are willing to provide some measures, such as maybe a do not block the box type marking to ensure that that driveway remains clear, to allow left and right turns into the site, as well as coming out to try to keep that location clear. There was a comment about an on-street parking space south of the site driveway, and MassDOT's recommendation that that parking space be removed. I do believe that the board's peer reviewer also acknowledged that comment, and I believe agreed with MassDOT on that as well. I believe in terms of what potential improvements might be made at the intersection, in terms of developing maybe a separate right turn lane, certainly removing that space would help in that regard to, better separate the left and the right turns from Central Street going onto Front. Whether that has an impact on the on-street parking is a separate issue, but certainly from an operations perspective, having that ability to have those 2 lanes queue up with adequate spacing would be important. And then the third comment was, I guess, a suggestion about limiting turn restrictions. MassDOT's comment was that that the driveways operate fully accessed, in other words, allowing all the turns to occur. We would agree, especially on Front Street, where if you limit those left turns, we would concur with MassDOT's comment that that would divert all that traffic onto Central Street, which would exacerbate the conditions that are currently experienced. And so we would support having both driveways be fully accessible for all movements. But with that, if there's any questions.
Phil, can I just ask you to address the potentially proposed changes to the intersection that you've taken a look at?
Sure. So it's our understanding that MassDOT has been involved in discussions about improvements or a new design for the intersection. Some very rough concepts that we've looked at, one of which would include adding turn lanes to the intersection, so left and right turn lanes at Central Street and a left turn lane on Front Street heading eastbound, turning onto Central Street is one option that has been discussed. Another option is a roundabout for the intersection. And again, the concepts that we've looked at are very rough in nature, so really don't have any strong opinion about a specific design detail, but I would say that in either case, our site would work well from an operational perspective with either design, again, especially because of that Central Street driveway being moved further north away from the intersection. That would really allow either concept to, I think, function well with Cumberland Farms in terms of allowing traffic to regress. I don't have enough information to be able to speak of the validity of one option versus the other for the intersection. There's a lot of other factors that would come into play, traffic volumes, other site distance, or other geometric concerns. But in either case, we think that the Cumberland Farm site, as proposed, would operate well.
Mr. Gould.
On the basis of entrances onto Central Street, is this based on a motor vehicle, a box truck, an 18-wheeler, or a gasoline delivery vehicle?
If I can show an exhibit for the board. Oh, it's already up for me. Magic behind my back. So we were asked to develop a turning template for a Cumberland Farms fuel truck, and I'll note that Cumberland Farms has their own fleet of delivery vehicles and can control the routing of those vehicles as well as the time of delivery for those vehicles, since it's the fleet that they control. What we show is a tanker truck coming eastbound on Front Street, making a left turn into the site, stopping near the tanks to make their fuel deliveries, and then continuing, turning right onto Central Street to leave the site. So there's adequate circulation within the site for the fuel truck delivery, which would be, we would believe, the largest vehicle that would come onto the site, and adequate maneuverability to be able to make those deliveries.
So you're saying that in a normal day, during regular store hours, that you can get a tanker out of your property onto Central Street?
Yes. I don't know when those trucks would come. That would be something that Cumberland Farms would control in terms of the timing of those deliveries. But in terms of the ability for the truck to maneuver onto Central Street, we do believe that that can take place.
Did you actually see one of those trucks come out on Central Street? Well, it's not funny. because you can't get it out there, sir. If you got cars parked on both sides, there's not an awful lot you're gonna get out there. You're not gonna get out one of your box trucks, and you're not gonna get a tanker out either. You can just barely get it out up here on Front Street. How long are one of them tankers? In feet?
In feet? I believe it's shown here. 50? 50 feet.
20?
50 feet.
With the tractor? And how wide is Central Street?
How wide is Central Street?
Yeah.
I'd have to measure it on this particular map, but, or the plan, but
Okay.
it appears to be wide enough from what I'm looking at here.
I'm not gonna let go of this.
Actually, if I can continue on to what Mr. Bond said, looking at your picture, the arc of your truck, that is requiring the use of the entire street, both sides?
That's correct, yes.
Not gonna happen.
And the line that you're showing, the lower line, is that assuming there is no parking on the street?
This line here
Yes.
would be the curb.
So that'd be the curb. So
Yep.
if there were cars parked, as my colleague was saying, that arc at that point is not going to be able to fit.
What I would
You're
say,
looking at, there it's showing it needs the entire street.
Let Mr. DeStefano. Sure. Luke.
It's not uncommon for fuel delivery trucks and delivery trucks at these types of facilities to use both lanes on situations like this. And what we've also found, and I've been designing gasoline facilities and retail properties for 22 years, these templates are shown are very conservative. So if we can get it to work on paper, it's going to work in the field even better. And if any of you guys know tractor trailer drivers, you've seen them, and they can do some pretty amazing things with those tanker trucks. And as mentioned, Cumberland Farms, they do this every day at every location, so this isn't new to them. They can get the fuel delivery vehicle truck into and out of the site today, and we're only making it better under the proposed condition. The other thing we need to take into account is that they'll be making deliveries during non-peak hours. So the hope is that you're not going to have a tractor trailer truck on property trying to get in and out when you have high volumes of traffic or the highest volumes of traffic on the right-of-way or cars parked on either side. So ideally, they'll be making deliveries during off-peak hours when traffic along the roadways is less than it is during peak hours, and when you may not have some of the same congestion you would have under normal circumstances.
Mr. Chairman. A couple things. First of all, talking about the deliveries, he said ideally they will be making deliveries during off-peak hours. Is it within our powers to specifically limit when those deliveries can be made to and from the facility?
I believe so.
Okay. And this has nothing to do with the deliveries. But one of the concerns that I have it now, is the traffic that comes up Spring Street, turns right onto Central, and then immediately takes a left into the parking lot at Cumberland Farms. I've seen more close calls in terms of accidents between vehicles and pedestrians over the years, and I just wondered, again, I realize a lot of it has to do with what the state says we can and can't do traffic-wise. Can a left-hand turn
This is not state.
into the parking lot from Central Street at that location be prohibited?
and if I may, sir, one of the things that we are doing that's changing from the existing condition is because we are acquiring those additional parcels, we are moving that Central Street driveway further north. So that would improve that condition that you're talking about. So it wouldn't be such a drastic right then left type of maneuver. It would be, you'd have to travel a little further north on Central Street and then stop to make the left turn under the proposed condition.
Mr. Gould?
Oh, I'll yield to the gentleman.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to comment about my previous comment and the gentleman's, reply. Typically, when we see these proposals, and we hear the best-case scenario, we hope it to be true, but we never know. But in this case, we actually do know. As the gentleman mentioned, we've had trucks delivering fuel to this property for many, many years. And I don't know about anybody else here, but I myself, in 10 years, have never run into an issue with their fuel truck on the street. I know many locations that we've all experienced in this community or other communities where we have fuel trucks or 18-wheelers in general block the road, but I've never experienced it here. So I think I could easily be satisfied by, again, understanding the fact that this is a property that has been in use for many years, and the use is about to be improved. So if I haven't seen a problem in the last 10 years, I don't think I'd see a problem with the fuel trucks in the next many years. Thank you.
Mr. Gould?
Well, it will if they come out a different driveway. And and if a fuel truck is only 50 feet long, I don't think so. I don't think so. I can appreciate what these gentlemen are saying. I'm not knocking any of you over there, but it's a very testy thing because the gentleman over here is correct. They try to come when there aren't too many people around. But if you're going to store this open 24 hours a day, they're not going to come at 3 o'clock in the morning because you probably only have one employee, which means they're going to come during traffic time. Now, a couple of weeks ago, had the delivery truck come, 18-wheeler. He pulled out on Central Street, pulled up on the sidewalk, and wiggled his way up to the front door, across Central Street on the sidewalk, because he couldn't make it any other way. And this happened to be on a Sunday. So, I think it's something basically that, we need to take a look at. But there's a lot of things we need to take a look at, so I'm satisfied for the time being.
For the moment. One quick question. When you did your study, did you factor in that you will be increasing the flow to the store with the type of items you're selling as compared to what it is now?
In terms of additional traffic, or?
Yes.
Yeah, let me say that, and this is something that we meant to actually talk about in our narrative. It is a larger store, but it is larger in large part because we want more storage space for the product. We will have lots of coolers, and then there'll be back rooms for the product to be sold. So the idea is, of course, like any business, to increase the product being sold, but the idea here is also to increase vastly the storage area so as to decrease the number of deliveries of product. So the display area is actually not as significant, is not going to increase as significantly as the offices, the cashier's area, the storage area for the dry goods and the refrigerated items.
Any other questions from the members?
I got a lot of questions, but I'd like to have them finish.
Sure, go right ahead. Keep moving forward.
I think we're pretty much done with our traffic presentation, and very happy to move off of that and on to maybe other questions that you folks or members of the public might have.
Well, I think at this time, and if we could speak to, have Tracy Murphy, planning agent, speak to the letters that came in from the DPW, from the state. She's already touched on it, but
Sure, thank you. I do want to follow up with the state. Couple of issues that got brought up with the new curb cut being moved down Central Street. In the process of our conversations with the state regarding the intersection, their engineers are actually pleased that the entrance is going to be across from the IGA parking lot, so it, in a sense, tees off those two curb cuts. So it's actually an improvement that it's being moved down, and it should improve this. It improves the situation rather than making it more difficult. They don't feel that there's any reason why to limit the entrance or the exit on either Front Street or Central Street. I also followed up with the state because the scenario where they gave their comments was relating to adding turning lanes and stop signs, and the Board of Selectmen recently voted to pursue a roundabout. So I wanted to make sure that the state's comments were relating to a roundabout, because it's important to us that the project for the intersection and this project are in sync, and they complement each other. And his response was that it actually, for the roundabout analysis, the queue is actually shorter in length, so it will not hinder the entrance or exit on Central Street. So it's actually even better that they're considering a roundabout. And the state doesn't feel that Cumberland Farms would have to make any concessions for that scenario. Moving on to the Public Works Director, I think I touched on it. He supports the application for the special permit for the conventional drainage structures. He feels also very strongly about the improvement to the drainage to Central Street. As most of you know, that we're looking at getting Central Street on the TIF, and this is just work that we won't have to include in that project. So it's, on Cumberland Farms is helping us out in that respect. I just need to find my. You also have in your packets a letter from the building inspector. You'll notice his letter is dated in February. It was in response to the Zoning Board of Appeals application, and I asked him if he had any changes to make to it, which he did not. He did bring up to the fact he is concerned about the parking spaces. The requirement, according to our bylaws, is the 28 parking spaces, and of course, as you all know, it's up to your discretion on you have the ability to waive that. So he just wanted to bring that to your attention. He also you'll notice in that he brought up comments about the stacking requirements, which have been addressed through the Zoning Board of Appeals action, and the pump lanes. Front Street discharge, we've discussed through all our traffic engineering through the state. And then the historic aesthetic has been addressed through the Historic Commission, their work on the historic aesthetic of the replacement. So other than the parking, his concerns have pretty much been met.
Excuse me, Ms. Murphy,
Sure.
if I just may note that the building inspector's letter is from February.
It is correct.
So, we can see that we've addressed some of those items.
Absolutely, yes. Other than that, the police chief had no concerns. He would request that Cumberland Farms representative coordinate details during the construction phase, just for the safety of, and keeping traffic flow. The health agent has no concerns for this project. The fire department has no concerns. I want to add that both the fire chief and the police chief were actively involved in the Zoning Board of Appeals phase of this project. The Zoning Board of Appeals relied heavily on their thoughts because of the stacking and the escape lanes and safety issues. And both are pleased with the outcome of that. So he had, the fire chief also had no concerns. And then, finally, we have the letter from the Historic Commission. There are representatives from the Historic Commission here. So rather than have me speak for them, since they're there, I'd defer to them to speak on their own behalf.
Okay, is there anything else, Ms. Murphy?
There is not.
Mrs. Murphy?
There is not.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, real quick.
Mr. Kelty.
In response to the DPW letter and
Sure.
the parking spaces, Was that a concern more about the parking spaces or about it being in the bylaws?
The DPW
The building inspector.
or the building
Oh, the
inspector?
building
Okay,
inspector,
okay,
I'm sorry.
sure.
Yeah, the building inspector.
He brought up, I think it was probably both. One about the requirements of Article 8, but also he cited square footage of the building, which is what we base our parking standards off of, the ITT standards. The applicant explained tonight some of the reasoning for the square footage of the building being storage. Whether or not he took that in consideration, I can't speak for him on that, so.
Yes, Ms.
And
Vine.
just one real comment, this has nothing to do with what Cumberland's can do, has to do more with enforcement. I know we often see the officers sitting in the mortgage company parking lot looking for violations by drivers coming through the intersection. And maybe it's just because it's a pet peeve of mine that I happen to mention it, but I think we should also encourage the police to keep an eye out for what pedestrians are doing in that intersection as well, because again, just having been here long enough to see the number of close calls we've had from pedestrians either not using the crosswalks and just bolting from in between vehicles when they think they have a chance to make it across the street. And again, I don't know what likely changes we'll see if a rotary or a roundabout is put in there, if they move the crosswalks. I think it's certainly incumbent upon us and anybody else concerned with public safety to ask our police department to not just look at the drivers, but look at the people that are on foot utilizing that intersection as well.
Mr. O'Keefe?
As my colleague brought up the very important issue of pedestrians, we spent quite a bit of time talking about vehicular traffic. And here I'm going to sort of throw out kudos to not only the people of Cumberland Farms, but our own historic commission. As a pedestrian, I live in this neighborhood, so I very much would like to be able to walk to your store. And I look forward to it. Today, I refuse to walk to the store. I mean, you take your life in your hands sometimes with that traffic. But with the design that's being shown to us, you know, and again, all the hard work that's gone into this, it's now going to be a store that's very easy to walk into from the sidewalk. There will be no cars that have to pass me between the sidewalk and the store. So the issue of pedestrians is a very important issue, and I see now it's going to be much safer for pedestrians that want to walk in. That's also one reason, though, I think the number of parking spots that are being proposed by the applicant is adequate. Right now, if I actually want to go to the store late in the evening, because you are open, I have to drive there because I'm afraid to walk in, you know. And I do think 28 spots might be reasonable for a business that you're going to be inside for an hour. Typically, when people walk in your store, they're in there for a couple minutes. So the point of the number of parking spots, I think the applicant is sufficient with what they've proposed. Thank you.
Question?
Mr. Gould.
Did I, tell me about the parking spots again?
The parking spots by our bylaw, due to the sheer size of the building, are stating that it would be recommended 28.
Yeah?
But that would be a business, like maybe a restaurant that you're at for quite some time. Here's a business that you're in and out of in minutes. So what would there be a need for 28 parking spots?
Well, that's my pet peeve, and I did some research on this, and I totally disagree with you. If you take a look at their parking setup, I think they've marked it off 9 by 18, and most of them are 10 by 20. Secondly, 2 of them are for employees. The other is for handicap. And in the winter, you're not going to have any because there's nothing on the plan that shows how they're going to get rid of the snow. Now, so I did a little bit of research on this. It's a 5,000 square foot building. In Athol, a 3,816 square foot building, they got 21 spaces. Their second store is 2640, they got 19 spaces. In Gardner, they've got 21. In Westminster, they got almost 20, all smaller stores. This is the largest store around here with the least amount of parking spaces. So I'm going to tell you right now, there's no way that I'm going to support the waiver. No way. Because you got a store, and they're telling you now with the new store, and I agree, it's a nice plan, and I'd like to see it built, but I'd like to see it built right. You know, a planning board is supposed to represent everybody here in town. How about the people on Central Street that are going to lose parking spaces, like the restaurants, or the Chinese restaurant, or whatever the case be? That's not fair. In order to get my vote on this thing, and I'm going to tell everybody ahead of time, you fellas are going to have to make some additional parking spaces here, big time. That's simply not enough, because in the winter, it's not the question of parking. You're not even going to be able to get in there. So my suggestion is that you're going to have a new store, you're going to have more people, you got food, you're going to have people that are going to sit there longer. And you'll lose 3 spaces with employees and the handicap. That leaves you 7. You need to take a look on the plan, and it's 040, at some of these parking spaces and see just how cramped it really is. That's my point. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Vine.
I don't totally disagree with you. But I guess the only point where I might disagree some is that, while they're not running a restaurant, plans do call for seating outside with the umbrellas where people can sit and consume. And so they're not running a restaurant, but they are asking people to stay longer than they might otherwise at a normal convenience store. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration as well.
Yeah, we just like to quickly address, because we certainly don't want to get bogged down, and we could probably have more discussions about this, but I think the comparison of some of the other stores, there are different sites, different types of areas. Those spaces those other stores are different types of locations, and more likely than not, the spaces are not fully utilized. But we can certainly continue our discussions about that, but we'll respond to that after some more research on that.
If I may, have you considered utilizing the space behind the store that you have for employee parking? It was just...
Well, we're using them for employee parking, and that's in order to afford...
I'm sorry, I can't.
We're going to use those for employee parking. That'll afford the other spaces.
Behind the store, I mean, through that right away and up into that area that you have grassy.
Well, it's less impervious, less pervious coverage, and we're going to get into issues of impervious coverage, I think, number one. I'm not sure it's functional, but I'll let Luke...
Yeah, there's grading issues that we would need to take into account. I mean, generally, you're going to have 1 or 2 employees, most times during this location. Some get driven to the store, some walk. Basically, as it boils down to parking, nobody wants the site to be underparked more so than Cumberland Farms. They wouldn't be doing this if they felt they were creating a situation that would become an inconvenience for their customers, because they're a convenience store, they're in a convenience business, they want people coming to this facility. I think, as mentioned, when you look at this site, it's in a downtown. You're going to see more pedestrian access to this facility than you might see at other locations. Some of the other stores you mentioned, I'm very familiar with most of the stores that you had touched on. We also, as mentioned, we have 10 parking spots that are striped. We also have another 6 at the pumps, which we all use gas stations in New England. Vast majority of the people who use these facilities, they park at the pump, While they're getting gas, they're in the store getting what they need, they come out and they go. They're also parking on the street here. There's designated on-street parking that can also be utilized for this facility. So when you factor in the parking that we provide, parking at the pumps, on-street parking, I feel the site is definitely well-parked for what's going to be on-site. And the other thing is I do this all over New England. And I feel that this bylaw is a little aggressive when it comes to the parking requirements. Most of what we're seeing for parking in most municipalities now are 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of retail area. They'll usually allow you to take credit for things like storage, restrooms. So if we took that and we factored in even a little excessive retail area of 4,000 square feet, you're talking about 16 parking spaces being what most bylaws would require for a use like this. Ironically enough, we have 16 when you factor in the 10 that we're proposing plus the 6 at the pump, and even more when you take into account on-street parking. So I think at the end of the day, we have adequate parking and the site will function very well if constructed as shown.
Question.
Yes, Mr.
Well,
Gould.
if that's the case, how come you got so much parking at all the rest of your stores?
Well, if the area affords it, they'll provide it.
And what we're finding is most municipalities, again, are going away from these very aggressive parking regulations because even if all the parking spaces are used, it's gonna be maybe an hour during the morning commute, an hour during the afternoon commute. The rest of the time, the site's pretty much empty. Not empty entirety, but you don't have the majority of traffic the majority of the time. And you're seeing towns move away from these aggressive parking bylaws to promote green space, additional landscaping, infiltration, stormwater improvements. So again, every site is unique. This one we feel based on where it is, what it is, the parking provided is, in my opinion, more than adequate.
I have a question. Your employees are parking in front of the dumpster,
Correct.
and they're set in. Is there a thought of getting 2 more spaces from having 2 spaces behind the employees? Because employees are gonna park there, sit there for 48 hours.
Like a tandem parking spaces.
If that's the word you use. Because the people that are parking and those are in and out.
I certainly think, given the layout, you have that opportunity with the way the site's configured right now. I assume you're talking about adding a couple more because we have the employee spaces right here.
Yes.
We could add 2 more right here. So we'd effectively have 12 parking spaces plus the 6 at the pump, so we'd have 18 in total.
The first time the dumpster guy comes and finds the cars there, they'll stop parking there.
Well, they're gonna find employees' cars there to begin with, so, and the other people are just gonna be there for minutes, so the dumpster guy
How do you
can
know?
wait. I'm not too concerned about the dumpster guy.
Yeah. The first time they come in, there's a car there, they take off, don't worry, they'll
That's
cut out
Cumberland
parking
Farms'
there.
problem, not mine.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, it's ours, basically.
No, it's
Make
theirs.
sure it doesn't happen.
It's not yours, it's not mine, it's theirs.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may ask, if you can pull up this picture again, please? Question I have is concerned with the sidewalk as it goes around the curve. Currently today, there's a chain link fence because it's a drop-off. Where the gas pumps are is set down. This looks like it's all almost on the same level.
It's a little bit, well, you can explain how these
Yeah,
photometric things
that
come up.
landscape area now is gonna contour, again, with the contour, the grade interior to the site. So we're gonna try and match, obviously, the sidewalk grades, and then feather that in as you go. So I don't think you're gonna have that steep drop like you have today.
Okay, so the
It's a
drop
direct-
will be handled in the landscape
Correct.
region.
Right now, you have basically a direct connection between the sidewalk and then the pavement. Here, we have some landscaping, and we're able to pick up that slope in the landscaping versus just a drop-off.
I'll also say that we try, the company that does this tries to match as best as possible. Is that going to be the exact look?
Well, that was
It'll be
really
about
the
as close as
question.
possible,
I mean,
right. You
we
can only
know
do so
the-
much with these and show everything.
Yeah, we know the road on the northern side, of course, is much higher
Yeah.
than the southern side, so I don't know if it's as much just an artist rendition versus what your plan is.
They do the best they can to match conditions, and will it look as flat as that? Perhaps not. It may look a little more sloped than that.
And you mentioned the possibility of putting in a fence.
Yeah,
Would it be around that curve again, like the fence is today, or where were you thinking of a potential fence?
Well, that's a kind of a segue into the Historic Commission. We had discussions with them about putting fencing area around the perimeter of the landscaping, granite posts, perhaps with bollard, bollard and chain kind of a look. But yeah, it would go from driveway to driveway, or as close to that as possible. And the design will the Historic Commission has suggested some designs. We're happy to advocate for them, but again, we recognize that you folks are the ones who ultimately decide on that.
Mr. Chairman, since this is at least the third time we've heard reference to the Historic Commission, could we actually get them up and, because they've been working on this, much longer than this full board has.
Absolutely, they were next on the agenda, but if you'd like to take them up here now, if, Mr. Bowen, would you like to come up and speak to this project from the Historic Commission perspective?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Thank you very much for having us here this evening. We're very excited that, jointly excited with Cumberland Farms, that we're able to finally present this project to you and both be very supportive and proud of the work that we've done together to get to this point over the past at least 18 months. Many of the points you've brought up, I've been tongue-in-cheek back there, just chomping at the bit to be able to say how we've worked so hard together to get these things done. And to Mr. O'Keefe's point about the grade not being quite accurately reflected, as we all know, it was difficult for the person who made the rendition to try to capture the current grade in that way, or the way that they wanted to mitigate that. But we did talk with Cumberland Farms, with Attorney Lombardo and with Ms. Johnson about that, and about how they're going to not have that current drop off. There will be some sort of a slope or grade from the curb as that does change. There will be a bit of a retaining wall there. There will be, some small height, and we were looking to mitigate that with a granite post and black iron chain of low to the ground, and it wouldn't be a fall that we would be worried about at that point, because the grade would be almost the same as the sidewalk. And the iron chain would not impede traffic view or impede the storefront, if you will, or anything like that, and it would be very aesthetic and actually in line with the historical accuracy of what may have been on Central Street years ago with the hitching posts. So that was our main motivation with that particular caveat. On the back retaining wall, we had requested of Cumberland Farms that they put in a black iron fence on the town hall property border, if you will, and that would prevent anyone from falling from that grade that will continue to exist. So that retaining wall will still be there. That could be a fall hazard if there were not a fence there, and we believed that it would be most aesthetically pleasing for the proposed historic district to have black iron, and Cumberland Farms agreed, contingent upon your approval, to present that to you this evening. The design of the building, we are absolutely elated that it has gone through. We are unfortunately losing the historic buildings that are beyond rehab, and Cumberland Farms has offered to mitigate historic preservation as well by way of a proposed grant to fund the certification of the Downtown Village Historic District. We are 100% unanimous with all 7 members in our support of this project, and we're very proud to be here before you this evening as such. We'll entertain any questions.
Mr. Chairman, you have a list here of items that you would like us to approve, these coming from the Historic Commission?
Yes, sir.
And things you'd like us to add as conditions?
We would respectfully request that of your board, Chairman Cobacero. As you've worked previously with the Director of Planning, Mrs. Murphy, who we have an excellent working relationship with, and we thank her for everything she's done for us in this project. Also with Mr. Blanchard, with, say, the ZBA and the police and fire chiefs, and we don't think it's too lateral of a request for the proposed conditions for site plan approval. If you have any questions relative to any of the bullet points, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Mr. Vine?
Now, I know you've been talking about a number of items where Cumberland Farms could be helpful, and one of the ones you mentioned was the historic district. And just to pull one out of the hat, funding to help pay for the consultant that would draw up that area. Are you still speaking with Cumberland's? Are you still in a negotiating phase, or have you gone beyond that to receiving commitments from Cumberland's that yes, we will do this?
In my conversations with both Ms. Johnson and Mr. Lombardo this evening, they have given every indication that that is still on the table, provided that some unforeseen astronomical expense does not arise between now and final approval, and them breaking ground, that would be something that they would do for us.
No, I can't read.
Can we take 5? Can we take 5 minutes? Recess.
Mr. Gould would like to recess for 5 minutes. Do you make a motion, Mr. Gould, to recess for 5 minutes?
The chair can declare it.
Okay, I'm going to declare a recess for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. One thing I have to note to everybody here is that our peer review just got his comments today, so we will not be doing a final vote on this because they still have a lot of back and forth to go. So this is just the start of at least one more meeting, if not more. And with that, I call a 5-minute recess. I call the planning board meeting back to order at 8:20.
Here we go. Most of these points are design issues and issues. There are a couple of points. The replanting of new trees, we're certainly interested in talking about. The allowing relocation of Joseph's Barn. We had discussions about allowing people under very controlled circumstances to remove items from the buildings or move structures, and so that's something we would certainly offer up, but we have a protocol for that. I'm sure you can understand, whether it's insurance or dealing with one point person from the town and other kinds of things. So we're open to these items in terms of the grant. As indicated, this is not shocking to us. We're not strangers to mitigation, and that's something we generally work out with the board during the process once we have an idea as to how much this project's going to cost. So we're open to that as well. Moving on from that, we have had an opportunity to look at the peer review, and I think, as you might see, most of it's highly technical. There, and I know your peer reviewers here. We're certainly going to attempt to address all the technical concerns and all the concerns about showing things on the plans per your requirements. We also note that certain waivers were called out that we hadn't necessarily asked for yet, and we're certainly of a mind to regroup and make sure we're asking for all the waivers that we're supposed to. So with your permission, Mr. Chairman, we'll take advantage of the period of time between tonight and the next time we meet to try to address all of the concerns raised and to hopefully have a nice colloquy between our engineers and your peer review.
On a back and forth, because a lot of these things, we're just citizen planners, so we have to take Mr. Fliss's lead on this.
And at first blush, I don't think there was anything in there that shocked the conscience of the engineers or with any kind of great surprise or hardship. So we are 100% confident we'll be able to address all of Mr. Fliss's concerns in that letter.
Very good. Now, does Mr. Gould?
Might want to check on your plan, the square footage of the lot, because I think your figures are off. And you might want to take off on one of your sheets, 48 Central Street. That's somebody else's building.
We will. We'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Vine.
Corey, I wish you had gone away like that. I'm not looking for anything, well, I guess I am looking for anything specific. I know you sounded relatively enthusiastic about the proposal. I'm just wondering, at this point in time, are there any concerns that the planning board should be aware of that the historical commission might have, either as a whole, or if you're aware of any concerns that individual members may have expressed to you about the Cumberland Farms proposal moving forward, just so that we have an idea as to whether at this point everything seems to have been addressed to your satisfaction, or if there are still little bumps in the road here and there.
I can very confidently say that we've deliberated this for a very long time, and that every single detail that we could possibly think of has been beaten to death. I think we would all agree on that, and that we are all very happy that this letter that's presented to you is the final product of that, and that we are all in unison that it is everything that we are addressing as a concern. And the historic preservation mitigation grant that they speak of is a key component of that, because we are losing the, if you will, historic epicenter of our town, and we want to make sure that we're replacing it appropriately, which they have done, and that the other structures are going to be preserved in perpetuity. And that is also being, as it's proposed, going to happen. And, you know, if it weren't for both of those two pieces coming together as well as they did in the end of this, I don't think we'd all be sitting here tonight. And we say that because the one hang-up that we had was there was no preservation involved in the project. And, you know, we all brainstormed together and came up with this idea that we're going to keep running into this problem as a historic commission as the years go by if we don't do something different. We've all recognized that the way to do that is to get the legislation passed at town meeting. The way to do that is to have the appropriate funds to do so, and Cumberland Farms has offered to mitigate that.
Thank you, Mr.
We're very pleased.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Bowen.
Thank you very much.
Chairman Bowen. Next would be, we have our peer reviewer here, Mr. Wes Fliss. I don't know if he has any comment or would like to say anything before we get to public comments.
For the record, Wesley Fliss, Whitman and Megum Associates. Again, the board has received a copy this around lunchtime today of our peer review. As the gentleman from the Cumberland Farms stated, a lot of the comments had to do in technical in nature. There are a couple items that I just want to bring up to the board, because I think clarification needs to come from the board or from the building inspector on if you guys need to act on a couple items, or if the building inspector has to act on a couple items, or the ZBA actually has to act on a couple items additional than they already have. And those two items would be item number 2, which is an item that I hadn't seen before dealing with the board, because it's specific to this section of the town, being Central Street, and it has to do with the type of trees that are required on Central Street. And I'm not sure if it's something that you guys want to have that conversation tonight with the applicant so they can get that out of the way. And I'm not sure if necessarily it would apply to this project anyways because of the intersection. And the regulation that I'm looking at is section 472H in the zoning bylaws, and it has to do with the trees. And I'll just read the regulation to you. As newly developed or redeveloped lots shall have concrete sidewalks and street trees along the entire lot frontage, typical of those on Central Street between Blair Square and Peterson Square. And I'm sure there are probably more mature trees than what are being proposed here, and I'm not sure that would necessarily be the best situation, at least for the rounding part of that site, because of the intersection. And I know the future work that's going to happen with Mass DOT, it doesn't make sense to put any mature trees there anyways, because they're probably going to be taken out as part of the new improvements that are going to happen at that intersection. So I'm not sure if that's something that, at least landscaping-wise, wants to be talked about. Maybe they can do something at least on the right-hand portion of the site that might work with that regard to that regulation. But it seemed like that regulation was specific to this area of town, being Central Street here. Obviously, you want to have that look of that downtown area with these trees being planted there. And so it's something that I was, again, first time I've seen this regulation because of the area of town that we're looking at now. And it was very specific the way it was written, and I'm not sure if anybody on the board at the time was on the board when this regulation was put in and knows the purpose behind the regulation either. So I'm not sure if it was part of Mr. White's regulation that he might have added in there, being on the board for so many years, he might have added in there knowing that that was his vision along Central Street. And I want to make sure
That was one of Mr. White's, so only he would be able to answer, and he's not with us to answer that, so.
So it's just something that, I don't know if the board wants to weigh in on that this evening, so at least one item I think that can be discussed between the board and the applicant this evening. And the second item had to do with the impervious coverage. Because that falls under the zoning table, our thought was it had to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, much like they had already asked for a couple other items, variances from the Zoning Board of Appeals. I don't know if this item can necessarily be waived by the planning board as part of the site plan review process, because it is a zoning item. Some of the other items like parking and a couple other items in here, grade and so forth, typically are allowed to be waived by the board as part of the site plan review process. But I wasn't sure if the impervious area calculation can be waived by the planning board, or if it has to be a variance by the ZBA.
As I understand it, we changed our zoning laws a couple of years ago so that the planning board can waive it. So we do have the authority.
Okay, and that's perfect, and that's what I just want to make sure that if that's the case.
That was a recent change.
Okay.
A year and a half ago when the bank parking lot was in that whole process, that's when it was changed.
Okay. And I just want to make sure that was done properly from their standpoint too, to make sure they're asking the right board for the case they need to ask the ZBA for another permit, basically.
Yes.
I think one of the biggest items, and this is basically all through, zoning bylaw issues. The biggest item, obviously, is in front of you is a special permit for the lid bylaw. And that was something that I think is discretion at the board. We can give you our opinion, but I think at this point, I think that has to come from the board. And obviously, the DPW has already weighed in on what his preference is. On how to deal with that.
Yeah, that's something the board with the parking, the board can waive or can, set different standards.
Right. And again, the rest of the items on here are technical in nature. Once we get responses back to the applicant and see what waivers they're asking for, at that point we can give you our opinion on waivers also. So there's a little bit of time that we'll go back and forth. And I'm not sure from a standpoint of how the board wants to handle it. We're okay having direct conversation. Is it okay if we have direct conversation, between ourselves and the applicant, or does everything have to go through the planning office, or how does that?
I think the planning office should be kept informed, but as I understand the process we've done before is
the direct
you send your
communication.
concerns to Cumberland Farms respond, you respond to them as far as the technical aspect, but at that same time, we are kept in the loop on all your,
And that's fine. I can CC Tracy on any of the
Exactly,
emails that
she
go back and
will
forth. Yep. And
bring it to us.
And I can CC you all, any of the board members that want to have, to see all the communication too. If you want to give us our email addresses, we can make sure it's on the email chain back and forth. If there are any emails sent back and forth too.
And I think Mrs. Murphy sends them to us so that at least we can see what the progression is, and not just A to C and how we get there.
Correct. Okay.
Anything else for Mr. Fliss from the board, or? Well, I think at this point in time, the next is public comment on this. And we've already heard from the store commission. They were going to be the first people up. So does anybody else would like to make public comment on this? Please come forward, introduce yourself, your name, and make your comments. Mr. Barrett.
My name is Mark Burlett. I'm the administrator of the estate of Irene Briette, which owns the abutting property at 40 to 44 Central Street, and I have abutting property owner concerns. In the site plan review, there's 31 pages of layout. One of the documents might be CFG 01.1 and then CFG 03.0. We have a right-of-way which is on the property that Cumberland is acquiring. It's been there for over 100 years. And it is in the deed that Cumberland Farms will be acquiring for the 32 Central Street property, the Joseph Drudy home. On the side driveway has a 14-foot width right-of-way by 86 feet long with a 10-foot right-of-way in the back of our property. It's the only access to our property. I would like Cumberland Farms to explain. It looks like they're going to encroach on that right-of-way during construction and block it off, and they can't do that.
Would you like to, somebody from Cumberland Farms, address whether you're blocking it or not?
They are putting the bales of hay right on our property line with a trench for their erosion control.
So I guess our answer is it is an easement. It's right of way. It doesn't mean that the next door neighbor owns the land. We own the land.
That's correct.
As long as we're not impeding access, which we don't plan to do during or after construction.
Where are your chain link fences for demolition going to be erected?
Well, we'll perhaps, I mean, we can go back and forth through the chairman, or perhaps we can have a discussion with our neighbor offline, which might be a little less, antagonistic, perhaps. We're certainly willing to work with our neighbor and make sure that their rights are not impinged upon.
Mr. Chairman, since we're not going to finish the hearing this evening, maybe we'll ask the two gentlemen to speak with each other over the next couple of weeks before we reconvene, and then ask the gentleman to return if he has any concerns still.
That sounds fair enough.
Yeah, I have notes which I will write up, and we'll have discussions with the applicant.
Yeah, I certainly don't mean to interrupt any other concerns that our neighbor wants to express. I'm just indicating that rather than get into something through this board, it might be more efficient and effective for us to talk, offline.
I do have other comments on the parking and recently, in the last couple of weeks, and I should have videotaped it, I observed a tractor-trailer truck, 18-wheeler, exiting onto Central Street. And that tractor-trailer truck had to back up 3 times before he could get a right turn onto Central Street. I think you really need to consider all exiting fuel trucks and all exiting box trucks should go up Central Street and not try to turn into the square. Because it does happen, even though Mr. O'Keefe has not seen it. I have observed it. Mr. Gould has observed it too. He stated too. So it does happen. I don't know how. I do realize that curb cut's going to go move up. It'll be where the current store is now across from IGA. So whether there'll be more room to do that, but I think Cumberland needs to address that issue. And the parking analysis, I think I left it over there. You currently have 6 spaces with 1 handicap. You're increasing the size of your store from 2,005 square feet to 4,956. That's 232 or 34%. You should at least be increasing your parking spaces by that. The 28 spaces, you didn't acquire enough land you asked for a variance for escape lane and stacking requirements, and now you're looking for a waiver for impervious and for parking. All of that could have been taken care of by acquiring at least an acre of land, because that's what their other stores have. And they are in downtown locations. Athol is, Westminster is, and so is Gardner. Those are my comments. Those don't affect us as an abutter, but it's my advice to the board to consider.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bullock.
Thank you.
Does the board have any questions from Mr. Bullock before he leaves? Any other public would like to speak to the issues at hand? If I see no other comment, I think we've got a lot tonight to consider. I think now that for the 5 pages of comments from Mr. Fliss, you'll have to respond to and then come back. So if nobody else has any comments or nothing else needs to be said, I would like to entertain a motion to continue this hearing till Mrs. Murphy, when would be the meeting time and such?
Through the chair, if I may, I believe the applicant may have a preference to that, if you...
Yes, thank you. We understand you have a couple of meetings coming up, one on the 5th of July and one on the 19th of July. We're thinking that in order to adequately respond to Mr. Flitz's comments and work with him, and then perhaps also discuss things with the neighbor, that the 19th is maybe more realistic. And with all the vacations happening and so forth, we're sensitive to the board schedule. But we'll be here on the 19th if that's the date. And so we leave it back up to you if that's okay.
How does the board feel on that, the 19th? At 7:05, Ms. Murphy, anything that, on the schedule that would preclude us from being at 7:05?
No, no. No, that's fine.
So if...
Like a motion?
I no one to do it, like a motion?
Yep. Motion to continue this hearing to that date and time specified?
Second.
So that date is the...
It is July 19th at 7:05 p.m.
July 19th at 7:05. How does board feel? Mr. Kelty?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. O'Keefe?
Aye. Aye.
Ms. Van? Yes, sir. And the chair votes aye. So this meeting is continued till the 19th at 7:05.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
take a 2-minute recess while people step away.
Okay, I am going to take a 2-minute recess to organize. Sure. To order.
Okay, let's go.
Please be quiet.
Okay, how much stuff we gotta do?
Okay, next item on the agenda is appointments. Capital planning. I am the capital planning appointee for the planning board.
Mr. Chairman?
If anybody else wants that position, please take it.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that you retain membership on the capital planning on behalf of this committee.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
We have a second.
Thank you, Mr. Gelton. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. I am reappointed, shucks. Committee meeting updates, Master Plan Committee. Mrs. Murphy?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer an explanation to the board that I did not have time to prepare updates for these committees this week because I was with the town manager this morning in Boston accepting our CDBG award, so I didn't have time to prepare it, so.
How much?
$1 million.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I guess if you brought in $1 million today, you know, you're excused.
I will, at the next meeting, have those prepared.
Good work, very good work.
Thank you, thank you. It was a collective effort.
Now, Montechusett Regional Planning Commission, Austin Saganowitz was the alternate. He attended, I was out of town last week. The only thing I can note is they re-elected officers for another year, and I was elected vice chair for another year.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Getting all these great accolades.
I think we appointed you for something at our last meeting as well, that you didn't attend.
We did.
I think this happens a lot to you guys.
I know. And so that's the only report I have on that. And Tracy is Montechusett Joint Transportation Committee. But as I understand, you don't have anything to report at this time?
I was on vacation last week, so Al Gallant did go, and if the board would allow me to prepare that report for the next meeting as well.
It would be, I think, our pleasure. Correspondence, I don't think there was any correspondence in the
No, there wasn't.
packet. Approval of minutes. What minutes do we have that need approval?
You actually, through the chair, if I may, you just were given 3 sets of minutes that I'd recommend that you table until next meeting.
Good idea.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Set a table to the next meeting. And other business? Any other business? I will entertain a motion to adjourn then.
So move.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 8:47.